Now, stay tuned for our next guest. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from her, I'm sure that you'll agree that she deserves to be called an interesting person. Saving America welcomes Cynthia Sun, who is a senior researcher at the Falun Dafa Information Center in New York. She focuses on persecution documentation, transnational repression, and public policy. She authored a report on Chinese influence at American colleges, which was featured by the Hudson Institute and Radio Free Asia. Cynthia has spoken at the Council of Foreign Relations, Harvard University, Congress, and more. Her latest testimony on state-controlled religion in China was published by USCIRF in October 2025. She recently concluded her service as a Freedom of Religion or Belief Fellow at the First Freedom Foundation in September 2025. Before joining the Falun Dafa Information Center, Cynthia worked as a research affiliate at the Innovations for Peace and Development and at the Edward A. Clark Center for Australian and New Zealand Studies. She is joining us today to speak about the serious issue of forced organ harvesting by the CCP of targeted minority groups, especially the Falun Gong. The CCP, folks, is so radical that it worries about people who support this quiet operation that focuses on, get this, meditation. That does not sound very dangerous to me. And I just found out before we began recording today that she is a proud graduate at the University of Texas up the road from us as we broadcast here from Houston, Texas. We welcome Cynthia Sun for her first appearance on Saving America as she's waving the Longhorn insignia for us here. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Dave. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's listening. I'm incredibly thrilled to be here. I'm so sorry that my biography was so long. And the USCIRF is the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. So it's a commission in Congress, and they hold a lot of events and hearings to better educate American people about religious freedom issues worldwide.
Well, boy, I'll tell you, we could probably do another show just on that. But let's start with some background because we see this name, but I don't know if people understand what it's about. What's the Falun Dafa Information Center? What does it do?
Sure. So it was founded in 1999 by my boss, Levi Browdy. He's from New Mexico, so we won't talk about that. But it basically, the goal of our organization, we're a human rights organization, and we're also a research center. So we research religious persecution in China, and we try to expose the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party. Those are our main objectives. And when he started this, 26, 27 years ago, my boss was actually acting in a reaction to the persecution of Falun Gong, which happened in 99. And so if people don't know what Falun Gong is, it was at one point in the 90s one of the largest spiritual practices and religions in China. There were 70 to 100 million people practicing by Chinese government estimates. And it's basically a meditation plus a moral cultivation. So you have, 5 sets of meditative exercises with music. People practice together in the park in the morning before they go to work, before they go to school. And then there's also the moral component, which we believe in a creator, we believe in heaven and hell, and it's Buddhism. And so we believe in truth, compassion, and forbearance. Those 3 moral values are what we try to live every single day of our lives by. But obviously, it's very difficult in a totalitarian country like China because, China, Beijing itself is trying to play God in an atheist country. And so with all of the one-child policy, with the Cultural Revolution, shunning gods and denying the existence of the creator, it eventually fell upon Falun Gong to be the next target because they were the biggest community of believers at the time. And so, in reaction, my boss Levi in New York saw this was happening, and so he created this information center so that people in the media, like Dr. Dave, or people in academia, and people in Congress all around the world could get information and ask these questions about, human lives that are kind of on the guillotine right now. It's kind of difficult to describe, but thousands of people have been killed and millions have been impacted.
It's interesting to me because it tells you how insecure and thin the CCP is when you're talking about people who are meditating. And my running joke on that is that I have two speeds, all the way forward and sleep. If I meditate, it's a nap. So I don't get to do that. But if your government is afraid of people meditating, I think the government itself has some real serious concerns, independent of a few people, a few million people, and of course that's about 7 or 8% of the population. It's not like they're afraid of a majority or anything like that. It's just when you've got 1.35 billion people, 70 to 100 million people is not quite a rounding error, but it shows you how thin this government is, that this is the group that they need to spend energy on picking on, and it's so unfortunate, but hopefully things will get better.
There have been estimates that billions of dollars have been spent to target Falun Gong, because if you think about the number of internet trolls, policemen, people in the judiciary, like court judges who have to rule guilty for reading a spiritual book or meditating in your own private home. Like everyone from every level, to like wardens, to detention center guards, to even like neighborhood watchmen and people who build the surveillance systems and who are tracking people of faith through surveillance. All of this takes money. Even if you think about, like, if you have a child, like I have a younger brother that's 10 years younger than me, just like managing him is enough money as is, like the amount of food that he needs. And like, he needs the newest iPhone, he needs a car, like even that is already difficult enough. But you're trying to force 100 million people to become atheist, basically overnight. That was the goal. Like the previous leader of the CCP said 3 months. He set 3 months as the goal to eradicate 100 million people, or to transform them into atheists. And so you just can imagine the amount of manpower, the amount of online resources, the data centers, like the energy it takes, like whether it's electrical energy or like gas bills, water, or anything else. Like human capital is like an expensive thing. So some people have conservatively estimated that over the past 27 years, billions of dollars have been used. And we haven't even touched on forced organ harvesting. But
Which is our very next subject. And as you know, my office is right up the street from the Texas Medical Center. In fact, my better half teaches in the Texas Medical Center and works as a PT, trauma PT on the weekends at one of the big hospitals there. And organ transplants have become almost routine in modern medicine in America. And in fact, I'm one of the millions of Americans on their driver's license who have said, I am an organ donor. And I think that's a very positive thing. But there's a twist to it, which I don't think as many Americans are aware as should be aware. And I think only a couple states have banned bringing organs in from China. Is that correct?
yeah, only 6 states have banned it so far by law, and Texas was the first one to lead it. So I think we can be extremely proud of our state, and of our leadership currently.
And so what's going on over in China? Why has this become such an issue? And the CCP, of course, denies that there's any involuntary organ harvesting, but I know that there's a gentleman who somehow got out of China, survived a forced organ transplant, got out of China, and has been touring and talking about his personal experience.
Yeah. So I think just to set the context first before we get to Mr. Chung, who actually is an acquaintance of mine. I've met him multiple times through work. In normal circumstances, in a democratic country where you have medical ethics set in stone, you have oversight, you have independent investigators, you have a system that has these checks and balances in place, organ transplant is a wonderful thing, especially if a patient who has terminal disease who desperately needs a transplant. I believe that America and the EU have led this entire movement to increase organ transplantation. And it's been done in such a safe way that some may think it's too slow. But I think this model of the West that we have right now is actually a pretty ideal model in terms of safety, in terms of ethics. But then you can't think of China in the same way as you think of the situation here in America, because in China, they don't have a system where it's like on your driver's license, you write that you are an organ donor. Culturally and historically, Asian people have the belief that if you donate your organs, even after you die, in the afterlife, wherever it is that the afterlife may be, you're going to be missing those organs as you go about the afterlife. And so you might
Okay.
heaven through the pearly gates with like a missing heart or something. That's just the belief. There's a lot of mythology and cultural history like embedded in that belief. And so, I mean, we don't have any proof, we don't have any, evidence of that, but that's just what's been transferred through generations, right? And so China and the rest of the Asian countries, you know, have very, very low donor rates, consequentially. But if you check the numbers right now, China actually is the biggest black market for organs at the moment. And I believe the past few years, their transplantation numbers have actually surpassed America, which is impossible. If you look at the heritage, if you look at the culture, if you look at how quickly the numbers jumped in number of surgeries for livers, 20, 30 years ago, there weren't even like transplant centers and large hospitals built for transplantation. They didn't even have the immunosuppressants for post surgery care. So it's just unbelievable that a nation like this could grow so exponentially. And I think the biggest red flag was in 2006, actually, when Pandora's box was opened and there was a whistleblower from China. Her and her husband both worked in Chinese hospitals, and her husband told her this is really, really graphic, so I'm really sorry to the audience, but he had harvested 2,000 corneas from Falun Gong practitioners while they were living. And he was so traumatized, he couldn't even sleep. He was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was a pay rate that was way higher, exceeded his normal income by tenfold, hundredfold. So that's why he kept doing it. But he would be tortured by nightmares, and he would tell his wife about these things because they worked in the same like medical complex. She came to the States in 2006. She held multiple press conferences about this. And this was 20 years ago. So I think most people didn't believe that this was happening. But over the past 20 years, investigators from multiple different countries have found through phone calls to the hospitals that admit that they're harvesting Falun Gong practitioners while they're alive, to even hospital websites that claim that you can schedule in advance a transplantation, which if you look back, if you like step back, it's impossible, right? How do you know that a patient's going to die? That's usually what happens here in the West, right? If you die and if you're declared brain dead, then your organ donor is actually in effect. But that status isn't in effect unless you're brain dead. But in China, somehow they know the exact hour and the exact day that someone is going to die. It's just unbelievable. So there's actually more evidence um, than is humanly possible, it looks like, because it's just volumes and volumes of evidence of involuntary organ harvesting. And the reason that they're harvesting Falun Gong organs is because in Buddhism, we don't drink or smoke. There's this belief of a pure mind and a pure body. Whatever you're given to by the divine needs to be cherished. And so there's multiple angles to that, but one of the biggest things is the organs are healthy, right? The liver doesn't have alcohol poisoning. The kidney doesn't have to go through, getting the alcohol toxins out every day. And the heart and the lungs don't have cancer or carcinogens in them due to smoke, right? And so there's like multiple elements, but the military, and this is in multiple books, but the military started using death row prisoners, and then from death row prisoners, they transferred onto, starting from 1999, when the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners happened, they suddenly had an organ bank, right? You have hundreds of thousands of people all across the nation in your detention centers, in your prisons, in your labor camps. They refuse to become atheist. If they get released, they immediately whistleblow the crimes that go on inside custody. And so if they don't transform into atheists, if they don't renounce their faith, if they don't deny the existence of the creator, then they're sent to the hospitals. They're given x-rays and cardiograms, and they're killed. I don't know what better way to say it. There's no really way to like package it, but they're killed, and their bodies are sold to tourists who need organs.
Oh my goodness. Now, how can we deal with this situation in the United States and in the rest of the world? How can we defeat this forced organ harvesting? I mean, we probably can't change what's happening in mainland China, but how can we prevent it from being these organs being brought into the United States and transplanted here?
Yeah. I mean, the good news is, like my acquaintance Mr. Chung had said before, the good news is it's not being transported here. All of the transplantation surgeries are being done inside China. So I think as long as we can stem the demand from outside China, going in to get surgeries and then coming out with those organs, with those illicit organs, there is a way. Because if you stem the demand, then the supply will stop, right? And then it won't be that never ending cycle of, more demand, more supply, more demand, more supply, right? So I think the biggest thing, biggest takeaway from the Texas bill, or Mr. Chung, who survived organ harvesting himself, is to stop the demand as much as possible. The Texas bill actually says that, the Texas insurance and other medical insurances won't support the cost for going to China specifically and other nations that have involuntary organ harvesting happening. So they won't support that trip financially. And even after you come back, that's something that you have to bear the burden of, because if you go to China, then you're knowingly getting an organ from someone who's still living, and who may be even alive, and young. There's no pre-existing medical conditions or anything. So in cases like that, when you go through the entire orientation and you're very well aware of the medical ethic concerns, if you go to China, then the insurance companies won't cover that cost, won't cover the trip. I think that's something that's quite positive, because then at least the American patients know what's going on, and that's their choice to make. We can't stop everyone from going. Obviously, there are very complicated situations. I lost my grandma last year to a cerebral hemorrhage, and it was terrifying seeing her like waste away in the ICU for 4 weeks. But there were no organs, and she was also nearly 90. So I think it's a really difficult decision for a family to make, like whether or not we should go and essentially, like, it's the train track question, right? Do you kill the switch, save your family members, but then kill multiple other people, like innocent strangers, in the process? And that's an ethical question that no one can answer for the family, but I think that's a positive first step for sure. And also, federally, there are two really good acts. One is called the Falun Gong Protection Act. It's in the Senate and the House, and we're hoping that gets a lot of support in the Senate, so that it passes before this August, because then lame duck season starts,
Yes.
election season starts. So we're trying to push the Falun Gong Protection Act through, and there's also a Stop Organ Harvesting Act. Both of the bills do a lot to help sanction Chinese officials who are involved in organ harvesting. And I think if we can kind of hit them where it hurts, which is their, US visas, their family's future, their children's education in the US, any other finances that they're hiding illicitly here or in
Yes.
other properties, I think that actually will make Chinese officials scared, because then,
It's interesting because we've been debating, as you know, in the Supreme Court, birthright citizenship, and of course we have this birth tourism, and so what you're describing is the contra is transplant tourism
yeah,
into a country that I certainly would never travel to, and I don't know that I've ever heard that the CCP were considered great administrators of medical advancement. I can't imagine having a organ transplant in another country other than the United States. So it's even stranger than it is. How can our audience get more information about you and this story on involuntary organ harvesting and how important that is?
the biggest thing would just be to follow us on social media. We also have a newsletter, a free newsletter, and we try to condense these into like a few sentences. We publish them every 2 weeks, and you can find us at faluninfo.net. So FALUN info.net.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia Sun. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your feedback and concerns. And remember, you can always like, comment, and subscribe right below. And if you've got any ideas for a specific episode or topic, be sure to let us know in the comments. And we generally not only read all the comments, we try and take action based on them. And you can also see us at our website, drdavesavesamerica.com.